The palace of Persepolis shimmered under the Persian sun, its golden columns glinting like the very rays of heaven. Inside its marble halls, silence ruled, a silence that hid whispers too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Behind those jewelled walls lived a king whose name echoed across continents, a man both worshipped and feared. His empire stretched from the Aegean to the Indus. His armies darkened the horizon, and his will was law. His name was Xerxes, king of kings, lord of the east, son of Darius, heir to an empire of divine blood. And yet beneath the crown that bound him to glory, there was a man torn by paranoia, vanity, and a pride so vast it devoured everything it touched, even those he claimed to love. The story of what King Xerxes did to his own daughter has been buried beneath centuries of myth and fear. It is a story whispered by scribes, hinted at in chronicles that dared not speak it plainly. For in the glittering world of the Achaemenid court, where gods and kings shared the same breath, love was not tenderness, and blood was not protection. Power, in its purest form, demanded sacrifice, and no one understood that better than the king himself. Xerxes was born into grandeur, moulded by power, and haunted by legacy. His father, Darius the Great, had built an empire with iron discipline, forging Persia into the envy of the world. When Xerxes inherited that throne, he inherited not just an empire, but an impossible shadow. The people saw him as divine, yet the gods saw him as flawed. His reign began with triumph, the crushing of revolts, the expansion of his dominion, but soon his ambitions turned westward, towards Greece. It was there that hubris began to consume him. The failed invasion of Greece scarred him more deeply than any wound. His army, once a river of men, had been scattered by storms and strategy. The defeat at Salamis shattered his illusion of invincibility. To the world he remained the king of kings. But within the gilded walls of Persepolis, his temper turned black. He trusted no one, not his generals, not his wives, not even his own blood. And it was within that storm of suspicion that the tragedy of his daughter was born. Amestris, his queen, was a woman of cunning and cruelty, feared even by the nobles. She ruled the palace with a venomous grace, her beauty matched only by her ruthlessness. Their daughter, whose name the scribes rarely dared to record, was young, intelligent, and kind, the single flicker of innocence in a world that had long forgotten the meaning of mercy. The courtiers whispered that Xerxes loved her more than he should, that his gaze lingered too long when she entered the room, that affection had turned into something darker, something forbidden. Whether truth or rumour, it was enough to ignite jealousy in the queen's heart, and jealousy in that palace was a weapon sharper than any blade. One night, as the stars hung over the desert like watchful eyes, Amestris threw a feast for the king's birthday, a lavish spectacle meant to remind the court of her power. The air was thick with incense and wine, the music of lutes echoing through the columns. But beneath the laughter and gold, the queen's heart seethed. She had discovered the secret glances between her husband and their daughter, and in that discovery, her wrath became divine. Xerxes, drunk with pride and passion, made a promise that would destroy them all. As custom demanded, on the night of his birth, the king granted a single wish to his queen, a wish that no mortal could refuse. Amestris rose, her eyes cold as the moon, and spoke words that silenced the hall. She demanded the life of the woman she believed had seduced her husband. The court froze, the king's face turned pale, for the woman Amestris accused was not a concubine, not a servant, but his own daughter. The courtiers trembled. To deny a royal wish on the king's birthday was to defy the gods themselves, yet to grant it meant spilling the blood of his own child. In that moment, Xerxes, the conqueror of nations, found himself powerless before his own pride. He could not confess the truth. He could not expose the scandal. And so, bound by his oath and his vanity, he gave the command. At dawn, the guards entered the princess's chambers. She did not cry out. Perhaps she already knew that her father's love was not enough to save her, that in Persia, affection was always second to pride. The palace servants were forbidden to speak of what followed, but the few who survived whispered of a punishment too cruel to imagine. One ordered by the queen, one permitted by the king. The girl was mutilated, her beauty destroyed, her life stolen in pieces. Xerxes did not watch, but he heard. The screams that echoed through the halls were said to haunt him until his dying breath. In the days that followed, Persepolis fell into mourning, though no one dared to weep openly. The king secluded himself from the court, speaking to no one but his guards. He blamed the gods for his shame, the priests for their silence, and the heavens for their cruelty. But in truth it was his own hand that had destroyed what little humanity remained in him. Those who saw him afterwards said he wandered the gardens at night, whispering to the shadows as though trying to summon the daughter he had betrayed. Amestrus, meanwhile, remained by his side, her throne beside his, her smile a mask of victory. The empire continued, but its heart had rotted. Xerxes became harsher in his rule, lashing out at rebellion, drowning provinces in blood, to quiet the ghosts that followed him. And though his armies still marched, and his banners still flew, the man beneath the crown was already broken. The empire did not speak of the king's shame, yet silence has a way of echoing louder than any cry. The story of what happened to Xerxes' daughter became a ghost within Persepolis, a tale carried in whispers by servants who feared their own voices. Every marble hall, every gold-plated door seemed to remember her footsteps, the soft laughter that once filled the air, now replaced by an emptiness that even the music of the court could not conceal. The great King of Kings, who had once commanded millions, could not command the peace of his own heart. In the months that followed, Xerxes' mind grew heavy with shadows. The weight of guilt pressed upon him like a mountain, yet pride forbade him from showing it. He spoke less, ate little, and withdrew from the ceremonies that once celebrated his name. When he sat upon the peacock throne, his eyes no longer gleamed with divine authority, but with the dull reflection of regret. The courtiers dared not look directly at him, for fear that his sorrow would turn to wrath. Amestrus, the queen, watched him with satisfaction that bordered on cruelty, her vengeance complete, her rival erased. Yet vengeance once fed is a hunger that never sleeps. Amestrus' cruelty became legend. Her power within the palace grew as Xerxes retreated into his own grief. She ordered punishments that horrified even her servants, mutilating the wives of nobles she suspected of disloyalty, condemning entire households for imagined betrayals. The court became a theatre of terror, a place where flattery was armour and silence was survival. The nobles who had once toasted the queen now avoided her gaze, for they saw in her not a woman, but a blade dressed in jewels. And beside her, Xerxes sat in silence, the ghost of the man who had once made the world tremble. The priests of Ahura Mazda came to him, urging repentance, reminding him of the divine order that sustained his rule. But Xerxes had long ceased to believe in divine justice. He told them that the gods were cruel reflections of man, jealous, prideful, and blind. He confessed nothing, but his eyes revealed everything. At night he wandered the terraces of Persepolis, staring into the desert beyond, where the sands swallowed all things, even memory. Some said he spoke to his daughter's spirit, that he begged her forgiveness in the stillness of the dark. Others claimed he cursed the gods for giving him a crown that had cost him his soul. The tragedy within the palace did not remain contained. Rumours spread across the empire, carried by merchants and slaves, reaching the far corners of Persia. They spoke of a king punished by his own pride, of a father who had condemned his child to appease a queen's rage. In Babylon, priests whispered that Xerxes had angered the heavens, that the goddess Anahita had turned her face away from him. In Egypt, where rebellion simmered once again, people said it was divine retribution, that the Nile itself refused to rise in mourning for the innocent blood spilled in Persepolis. The empire, vast and eternal as it seemed, began to tremble at its foundations. Xerxes sought to bury his guilt in conquest, as he had done in his youth. He sent armies westward again, though his generals knew the futility of his commands. His obsession with proving himself, with erasing his humiliation before Greece, consumed the resources of his empire. Gold bled from his treasuries, soldiers died in distant lands, and the people whispered that the king had gone mad. Even those closest to him saw the decline. Artabanus, his trusted bodyguard and advisor, wrote in secret letters that the king no longer ruled with reason, but with sorrow. He warned that the gods punish not only the wicked, but also the broken. It was then, as if by the hand of fate itself, that Xerxes' life came to a violent end. One night, while he slept in his chambers surrounded by gold and perfumed air, his own guards betrayed him. Some say they were bribed by his sons, others that Artabanus himself orchestrated it, claiming divine justice demanded retribution. The king, who had destroyed his own child in a moment of weakness, met his death in silence, stabbed by the very hands that had once sworn loyalty to him. The chronicles tell little of that night, for the scribes who survived dared not linger on the details, but the symbolism was clear: the destroyer of blood was destroyed by blood. When morning came, Persepolis was a city divided between fear and relief. The royal banners were lowered, and word spread through the empire that the King of Kings was dead. The courtiers who had once trembled before him now spoke of his fall as though it had been inevitable. The queen, who had wielded her vengeance like a sword, found herself surrounded by enemies. Without her husband's shadow, her power evaporated. Her name was cursed by the same nobles who had once bowed before her, and she lived out her days in isolation, a relic of cruelty and regret. As for the daughter, her name remained unspoken, her grave unmarked, but her story endured, a quiet defiance against the empire's attempt to erase it. Centuries later, travellers and poets would speak of her as the spirit that haunted the ruins of Persepolis, a symbol of innocence crushed by tyranny. Her tale became a whisper carried through generations, a warning that even kings cannot escape the consequences of their own hearts. The tragedy of Xerxes is not merely the story of a father and daughter, but of power without mercy, love without restraint, and faith without humility. It reveals the truth that every empire, no matter how vast, begins to crumble not from invasion, but from the corruption that festers within its walls. Xerxes sought to command the world, but could not command himself. He built palaces to outlast time, but his own name became a shadow, remembered less for triumph and more for tragedy. And so the man who had once whipped the sea in rage, who had bridged continents and burned cities, was undone not by enemies or rebels, but by the simplest of human failings: pride, jealousy, and the hunger for control. The story of what he did to his daughter remains one of history's darkest mirrors, reflecting how love twisted by power becomes something unrecognizable. It reminds us that beneath every crown lies a heart that beats, and that the higher one rises, the further one has to fall. If this story made you see the ancient world not as marble and legend, but as flesh and consequence, then subscribe to the channel and like this video. Because history is not only the story of kings and conquests, but of the choices that define what kind of people we truly are, and the prices we pay when humanity is lost to the hunger for power.